Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Jozef Frucek. So he is one of the two founders of Fighting Monkey. He has a background in all sorts of interesting things, from theatre, professional sports, voice and movement, communication, Chinese medicine. He has come incredibly highly recommended. Several of my students are obsessed with Fighting Monkey at the moment. And they said he's kind of like one of the most interesting people out there in the movement world. So I thought I'd have to have him on the show. So Jozef, welcome.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much for the invitation.
You're very welcome. You just come back from Australia, right? So you might be a little jet lagged.
Yeah, I was fighting with the sharks, so I'm in a pretty good shape.
Great. I'm off to wrestle bears in Russia next week, so we can compare notes. And so let's start how we always start on the show. How did you get into working with the body? What was the beginning of your story with the body?
I was very early in my age, led by my father because he was pretty much physically involved all his life. So that was the first example, probably for many other people. So I had a really long, diverse pathway through many different sports, and I was always flicking from one to another because I was not particularly interested being excel in one of them. And that led me through working sports when I was young, being selected to junior national team, but I've never really attended because I decided that art is much easier than sports. And then as I was starting to study acting and communication in university, I realized that I'm much more interested in being a stunt. And so I started to practice different forms of physical education. And then eventually I passed through martial arts, first the internal martial arts, and then eventually through all external martial arts that I know kind of informing our practice.
Great. And you found in this Fighting Monkey, I won't call it a system, a practice. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, I rather describe it as a practice rather than something enclosed or having two clear borders.
This is what I want to talk about. This is really interesting. So it came to my attention. First of all, I started seeing cool videos, and there was people with big balls of clay and people kind of fighting. And then one of my students came in one day with a tennis ball on a string and started throwing it in my head and making me dodge out the way and looking at my movement patterns. And Marcin, his name is, and he's a really experienced Kung Fu teacher. So to impress him, you have to be doing something a bit different. And I've seen all sorts of cool stuff. And it just looks like the most fun. So if someone walked in to a Fighting Monkey workshop with you, and it's Linda, isn't it, your partner who you train with, what would they see?
Well, it really depends on the context in which we appear to be together. So it differs when we work intensive. It's different when we search the research content and how we are thinking, what are our concepts that we are trying to articulate. The other thing is when we are meeting, you are a professional and you try to be better in whatever you do. So that would be another completely different practice. Another practice would be we would be talking about the anatomy of injury, earthquake architecture, or anatomy of events, which would be like a three main pillars on which the whole practice is built. So, and even if you attend the same workshop, the idea is that you're never going to see the same practice because we are evolving. And so there are no drills, there are no static programs. We try to evolve the practice each time you see us.
So it looked to me like there was an emphasis on play, an emphasis on sort of free movement and spontaneity, on relationship. And I was still trying to get to the heart of like, okay, but what's the point of it? What's its purpose? And it seemed to be some stuff in there about injury prevention and making yourself a better fighter or whatever you do, but also it just looked like a study of being human. I mean, that's what I've been able to take away just from looking at videos. So please correct me.
No, of course, we are so obsessed now by the movement, but you need to understand the movement in itself. It's an interesting idea, but it's really only for basics. So that means that of course we need to evolve as a movement, but movement is a very general term and doesn't mean anything. What we have to have a look on, if you're a poet, means that you have to write the poems most of the time. If you're a football player, you need to play football. If you're a fighter, you have to fight. If you're a painter or sculptor, you have to sculpt. It's not like when you're a super football player, you're going to start to make a movement. That would be like a 3-step backwards. We need to understand, if you're playing your game, if you're interested in something, how you're going to make that passion to last for the rest of your life. That's the whole point. So, instead of bringing people back to something that we would say, oh, you need to do Fighting Monkey, that's absolutely ridiculous. We need to kind of recognize what makes us human. So it means what makes us playful, what makes us to go and live life and love life. Because what appears, you come to your first class of jiu-jitsu, you come to your first class of boxing or a Chinese medicine class, and you're super excited, but over the time that kind of momentum is being lost. And I'm interested in how you can still keep fresh as you can be a complete beginner.
Yeah, it seemed to me, from what I've seen, this emphasis on learning, in taking things. I mean, we seem to share a passion for kind of how all the different arts out there fit together. Not to be like, hey, you've got to do Aikido or a karate fanboy or a capoeira fanboy, but to say, okay, they all offer something. How do we keep learning? And how, in the context that I'm in, can I keep learning?
Yeah. So of course, you cannot catch the mind. So because you said, how I can keep young. So people try to address it through a different mindsets or whatever, but mind cannot be caught by the hands. It's an abstraction. What is your mind? How are you going to grasp the mind?
How do you work
that? Grasp your mind only through the action. So what we are doing, we kind of trying to design a movement situations. This is what we do for the last 15 years. Through those complicated movement situations that are not all the time possible to solve, we are looking on how you are solving the troubles, how you are positioning yourself physically to the trouble, how you are communicating, and through that we can recognize your patterns of thinking, your patterns of moving. You become naked because you forget about yourself.
So you set up these movement experiments. Give us an example of what, I've seen a few of these with students playing with them, but what for people listening out there who are coming from, we have listeners from dance backgrounds, martial arts background, body therapy backgrounds, like paint a picture of what some of those movement situations you put people in look like.
Okay, let's have a look on one of them. So we were working recently with 4 meters tall 40 kilograms wooden beams, or 2 meters tall 50 to 70 kilograms wooden beams. And so we were speculating how we're going to be lifting and manipulating those objects. So we designing these abstract tools that have less kilograms, so they cannot wear your joints, your ligaments, your tendons. You're not gonna create herniation in your lower back. You're not gonna destroy your knees, but still becoming very complex. More very complex. You're going to be very powerful because you have this 70 kilos wooden beam that is not easy to grasp. So you need to speculate how to get it above yourself. So that would be like one of the situations where we would make you to get that object above your head, even if the base of it is only 25 by 25 centimeters.
And I've got friends that have gone to your workshop, one of whom was a PT, one was a Kung Fu teacher, one was an acro yoga teacher. I mean, it seems like you're attracting a kind of pretty broad church of people.
Well, we have people that are old. I mean, people that have worked with Fighting Monkey are over 8 years old. Some of them. Even in open workshops, we can have people that are over 60 because they can find themselves inside. They can lower the intensity and still find a lot of benefits. We have professional physiotherapists that are getting enough information on how to practice, how to keep their joints younger, how to understand the totality of our bodies. And as well as martial artists, it really depends what you want to see in the practice. These last 10, 15 years, we were busy a lot with cross motion analysis. So having a look on many different human forms, human expressions, and then looking for commonalities, looking for things that are in common, or what are differences, what is the difference between one and another. And so we were designing practice that could reinforce the human mechanics, making the body more biomechanically sound.
Yeah. And I've had a lot of people on the show, and of all the people I've researched, your stuff online was probably the most interesting, but also in a way the most nebulous. Like I was fascinated. I was listening to podcasts last night and watching videos this morning, and I was trying to get my head around it. I was like, yeah, but what is it? What's it for? Because you deliberately don't want to define it too much, right? You want to keep it free and open.
No, I don't want. It's very difficult to put me in a box either, Linda. I am not interested to make my world smaller. The world has to be big, and in order for me to help you or help myself to kind of evolve and grow older and interested in life, I in the moment I close the gates, in the moment I define clearly what we are doing, we basically kill it.
Yeah.
How I understand as a human being and motion, it's a little bit like a poetry. And also, so the joints between the words, the joints between one movement and another, it's a little bit more loose. So we are less interested in choreographies, less interested in defining this is for this will help you in this way. I think there's a lot of cheating. It's not ethical.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that really excited me looking at your stuff. It wasn't just that it looked cool and fun and, I'd get something from it that would help my martial arts or my life, all of that I thought. But I also thought, wow, these guys are taking apart the normal model, which is there's a teacher or maybe two teachers and they have a system and that you have to copy them and they're not learning from you. You're just learning from them, right? That's the sort of normal hierarchical kind of Asian style model that's been pretty much imported. And it looked like you were doing something really different.
Well, I cannot teach you anything. No one can. But if I place you in the right situation, in the right circumstances, you will be learning by yourself because you'll be looking for the solution. My only role is there to propose and give you feedback on what you are doing. Even when you have a child, they say, if you have someone unexperienced, you have to break it down for them. You have to go gradual involvement. I really don't think so.
Yeah.
And imagine you have a child in front of yourself and you know that the child doesn't speak the complexity of the language, right? But I'm not going to be choosing only the parts of the stories that my kid will understand. I will tell the kid the entire story, and the child will have child with these spots that the child will not understand. He will bridge it, or she will bridge it through her imagination, and that's exactly what we would be doing. So when we are teaching our students, we are teaching them random elements, and they have to bridge the black spots through their prior experience. So it would be as if when you're learning from us, you have 10 books, 10 different movement books. And we don't go first book because that's a basic book and you go first page, second page, third page. No, we open the third book and we go 60th page. Then we go first book, we go third page. We go 12th book, we go 150 page. So we go random. And therefore, as you are reading 12 different books, you're already creating your own language. I am not interested in having students that are copying me, drilling, or trying to create something that is too much on my image. If I'm helping you only to become better in what you're doing, I'm creating much more diversity, and diversity is immunity.
Yeah, I want to get back to that one. I mean, it reminded me of a few things. First of all, the difference, as someone who works in kind of coaching, it's very much more of a coaching methodology than a facilitating methodology and a teaching methodology. And the other thing it reminded me of that I saw was sort of like Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, where he said, look, I'm not going to nail this into a system. And it tried to keep it open and tried to keep it free in that way. They were the two things I was reminded of when I first kind of heard you speak about this. When you say diversity creates immunity, what do you mean by that? I mean, it's kind of a catchphrase. We're all supposed to be into diversity these days, but what do you mean by that?
Well, we've been traveling a lot around the world, still being an academical field, because that's where we spend most of our time. The Fighting Monkeys open to public only last 2.5 years. Previously, it was only for people in university, students of university. And what we realized, we traveled all around the world and everyone moved in the same way. And then we said, what's going on? How it's possible that someone in North America moves the same way as someone in South America? And then we realized this is the problem of having great, very powerful, influential teachers. They give it that image of someone being extremely successful, and so you biologically, this is our heritage. Or if this is successful, if this is popular, then maybe I have to copy it because that will make me successful and popular. But then we said with Linda, okay, no, that's not the way to do it. So we say, okay, can we, as a intellectual child, can we remove ourselves from the process of learning, and instead of telling you what to do, we propose. And you're going to solve it yourself. And if you don't have energy and guts to be by yourself, then I prefer you go. rather than being with us.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. It's bold. I like that. Also, just in terms of diversity, I'm aware that I get told I speak too quickly quite often on this podcast. About half our audience are non-native speakers, and you're probably the only person I've had on that's speaking more quickly than me. So if you wouldn't mind slowing it down a little bit, and I just know that the Russians and stuff who listen in will appreciate that. But,
Okay, I'll try.
And let's talk about psychology then. So, I mean, most of the audience on this podcast, they're not so interested in biomechanics. They're more interested in sort of body mind. So Can you speak to the kind of psychological side? I mean, obviously, two sides of the same thing.
Yeah, it's we are one animal. So you cannot say body and mind, because it's really one interconnected unity. And as I said, through these movement situations, because you're exposed, because you're busy with what you're doing, you basically open up the books of yourself. You tell me exactly your patterns of thinking, your solutions that you are offering, how often you get frustrated, how you are overcoming your troubles. And that way I can kind of find out how to maybe suggest the new ways of thinking or new ways of solving the troubles. I give you an example. We teach a lot of coordinative work, because we think like rhythm and coordination gives the birth to kinetic potential, and kinetic potential gives birth to power exploration. And so we decided that we're gonna teach two groups separately and in two different ways. So one is, I take a group, I explain them step by step what they are going to learn, how they are going to learn it, and what they're going to achieve. They learn very fast. The second group, I don't tell them anything. I don't tell them what to expect, how to learn it. I only expose them to the complexity of life. They suffer much more. They are forced to communicate between each other much more. They talk to themselves, they talk to the others, they observe much more, they are much more alert, but they learn much slower. But over the time, when you add and introduce other troubles, the group that was spoon-fed and everything was explained to them suddenly stopped to evolve so fast. And this group that was having a really difficult time at the beginning suddenly can learn much faster and adapt much faster and produce something that is maybe a cognitive reserve or even behavioral flexibility. That means they can apply knowledge from one domain into another very quickly. So this is what we are seeing.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And it reminded me earlier, you were talking about, how we learn, and that is how we learn, right? Like I'm learning Russian right now, and I might hear a sentence that I only understand 80% of it, but I have to fill in the rest. Or, the problem solving model, like I'm just in a supermarket in Moscow and I'm trying to get some groceries, and it's all contextual learning and I'm trying to problem solve. And I'm certainly not going to wait till I've got every single piece of grammar before I can get my lunch. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's how kids learn, right? That's the most natural way of learning there is.
That's the whole point. So when someone asks us, like, what is fighting monkey? So they explain them, okay, you have two choices. You can be a mice in laboratory and being observed in an empty white space and we see your behavior. Or you can be a mice with certain beautiful tools that can enhance your capacity of perception and problem solving. Or you bring into the game rats from the real environment. There is no comparison. Like when you're teaching people in a controlled environment, like in a laboratory, so I come in and I tell you what to do and how to do movement and how to evolve in a movement, you're like a mice in laboratory. But the people that are working with us are directly learning from the real environment. So that means they are like a little rats. They can solve the troubles very quickly. And I am very interested in that. I'm not interested in taking a knowledge into kind of boxed or out of context situation. I want you to being exposed to a complexity of the world. And that's how we have to evolve in a movement. That's how we have to evolve. No, we don't have to, but that's what I would propose.
Makes sense to me. I think it's a sophisticated approach. And what I was really struck by as well was the combination of a sort of martial arts and an arts mentality. So on the one hand, I hear you kind of like a martial arts teacher, they have to suffer and, that's, it's going to be tough and we're going to train you. And then the other side, I heard this like creativity and play and kind of like expressive arts mentality. And for me, like what I was seeing, and again, tell me if I'm way off because I haven't done your workshops yet. I still hope to. It would look like a kind of really nice, like a proper marriage between like an arts mentality and a kind of more like sports or physio or martial arts type mentality.
Like we design, or we kind of having we basing our practice around kind of 5 elements, and those 5 elements are based on trainings that are related to body training, striking, tribal dance, and sculpting. So again, if you go, the first one would be a 0 forms, kind of recorrective forms that make you to understand how to reestablish the balance against in your body. Striking forms, because they are very basic biomechanical forms. Body forms means everything that is related to judo, jiu-jitsu, contact improvisation, etc. Then tribal dance, it's everything that is related to communication, that is related to free expression. And then 5th one is an abstract tools and sculpting, or you can tell it also our physical poetry.
Nice. In some of the courses I'm doing, we're bringing together like 6 different practices of dance, which would include kind of like partner dance and then conscious kind of free dance as 2 different sides of that. The martial arts, the bodywork side where you're actually hands-on, you can learn different things by touching that you're not going to learn through kind of striking. The martial arts side, and also like improv and theater. I know you've got some background in that too, right? There's what I see now in the world is for the first time, all these different things are coming together. It's not like a Chinese guy who's got a Tai Chi teacher, or, there's always been cross-fertilization, but the speed of that now, the Western arts meeting the kind of Eastern arts, and people like me and you are doing it in very different ways, but we're still trying to answer this question of like, okay, how does this all fit together? And why can't you replace jiu-jitsu with ballet? Or why can't you replace comedy with therapy? Or it seems like we're in that time now. We're trying to figure out how what matters and how they all fit together.
I don't see any separation. I never seen them as a separated entities. And I think, like we always have to tell a story. We are always telling a story through our practice, and we are retelling the story again through our practice when we are teaching someone, or we are sharing the experience with other people. So, we're sculpting our environment. And, what always was interesting for us, from going from culturally valued objects, like these amazing forms, amazing concepts, going back to the raw material, like having a stone sculpture. It's not very interesting for me. I want a raw stone, and I want to get a hammer and a chisel, and I want to make my own sculpture. And I want the same thing for all my students.
What's play?
What is play?
What is play to you? A lot of what I saw in your videos look really playful. But I don't say that as a diminutive. I don't say that to put it down. Quite the opposite. Yeah. So I'd love to hear your take on play.
Okay, I explain to you in this way. So when you have a sports, so the sports, they have 4 lines. That's a representation of a sport. When you have a 4 line, they're enclosed 4 lines. When you have enclosed 4 lines, means that you can define the rules. And therefore, you can have a master and you can have a champion. What I'm interested is you break one of those 4 lines and you introduce an element that is very much close to what we experience every day in our life, is that you can alter the rules. And you can alter the rules anytime you feel fit. And so I ask you a question. What you would be training if in next Olympic Games, I'm going to introduce a new games, and you're not going to know which games they're going to be.
Nice. Yeah.
This is something that is really in my mind every time. So what is this fighting monkey decathlon? Our students, they are able to go from one domain into another with no problem, with no obstacles. They don't get shocked. When we've been working with the Olympic champion, the judoka Aziliadis, and they forbid a few of his grips. And I was asking him, because we were kind of speculating how to improve the practice. And I was asking, so what happened to your mind? And he says, nothing. They blocked my best grips, my best moves in a judo, which made me Olympic champion. And I didn't get pissed. I only understood the game has changed. Yeah. And I have to change with the game.
And that flexibility is way more like life, right? Like every interview I do is different. Every person you make love with is different. Like if you're a soldier and you're on a battlefield, you don't really know what's going to happen, or how you're going to attack that day. I used to do humanitarian aid work in war zones, and it was like just extreme, like every day you just wouldn't know. So you had to have that adaptability. If you turned up, like I remember the second girlfriend I ever had, and I went, oh, I thought I understood women. Like this is radically different, like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And then, of course, then you start to realize there's a pattern and there's a meta pattern and it's different. But like that sense of being adaptable and flexible, that's more what's required for life, right?
Yeah. Well, I give you an example. One guy that worked with us for last 20 years, his name is Lubo Kadnar. He's 35 years in Special Forces. And we kind of built up a very interesting concept. And because we were saying power or strategy. So he was telling me, if I kind of fulfill certain physical tests, let's say I just say some numbers, let's say you do 20 pull-ups with 20 kilograms on your feet, and you can run 3,000 meters in that amount of time, and you can do this and that. He said, if I have that, I approximately know I am kind of well-rounded athlete. If I'm going to spend more time on becoming stronger and more powerful, someone will probably die. Because when I am well-rounded athlete and I can understand how I'm working and my body is fit, I need to work on communication, tactics, strategy, observation, sensitivity, and capacity through intuition to understand invisible evolvement and invisible patterns that are appearing in an environment that could be a possible threat. And that is the same when you work the zero forms in Fighting Monkey.
So zero form, can you explain what that is, a zero form?
Zero form, it's a recorrective forms, like how can I help you to understand that something goes out of balance? How I can help you to do a form? How I can create a regular practice that will be a good immunity checkup for you. So it is something that will tell you early enough that something is wrong and you need to adapt your practice for a short term or a long run. This really depends. So how can I help your body to become so sensitive that you recognize the problem early enough before the huge damage happens in your structure?
Yeah.
And that can be within yourself or in communication with other people.
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about this on other podcasts and other interviews, sort of saying, look, there's no one right diet, but it's hard to sell like tuning into your body, which is actually exactly what I'm trying to do at the moment with food. Or to it's real easy to be like, okay, I do karate every Tuesday, or I do Ashtanga yoga every morning, or whatever it is. And it's very seductive, isn't it, to try and look for the answer rather than to keep in that conversation and to keep often losing that sense of expertise or credibility or the sort of social what would you call it, like social benefits that come with being perceived as good at something.
Of course, how are you gonna post on Facebook that you improved your integrity, or you improved your connectivity, or you improved your coordination? How are you gonna possibly show that? It's impossible unless you pick up some very spectacular form. But I give you another example about the spectacularity on Facebook or whatever. You have two football players, like the one that is doing a juggling, and it's amazing how he juggles the football. And then you have a professional football player like Ronaldo, who is much worse in appearance, but he can play a football, if you know what I mean. One thing is to expose yourself and say to others, look how amazing I am. While the other is in the field, he's an amazing football player, but he's not as impressive. Mm-hmm. And it appears in a short videos or combos.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the guys who do the basketball, the Harlem Globetrotters, where they're doing the sort of basketball hoops. I mean, those guys, they're not the best basketball players. They're people that have specialized in looking cool, right?
Yeah. So, like the best football players, they don't particularly look amazing physically. They either do not jump the highest, but they are able tactically to find space for themselves and help the team to win. And that's the whole point. But we are living in a time when you really need to look muscular, when you need to be stretched, and you have to have range of the motion, and you have to have this and that. I don't really think you need any of that. I think they're just some great marketing tools in the movement industry, like the deception of isolation, integration. What would have to be isolated? If you do isolation, you're probably going to invite into your body an inflammation. You're going to create a future injury. When we talk about range of the motion, what means range of the motion? The range of the motion is really nothing. It doesn't tell anything about the elasticity of your body.
And actually how you can use that.
Yeah, using these terms, but like we are just using them because we find them attractive and people find them attractive, so we have a better following. But I really don't want that, because my students will be telling a story in 10-15 years, and I don't want that they tell a shit story. So this is my number one priority.
Yeah, I go to a free movement practice usually once a week, kind of fire rhythms type event where people just dancing, and you can always tell the people that have a kind of specialist thing they're good at because they can't move. You can tell the martial arts people or the yoga people or whatever because they're sort of moving in a kind of clunky, disintegrated kind of way, as opposed to people who are movers.
But I add to that, when we work with the people that are on top of the games, really on top of the games, jiu-jitsu or judo or boxing or dancing, they are highly specialized.
Yeah.
They can transfer the knowledge to anywhere else because they are so amazing in what they are doing.
Yeah.
So when someone says, when you're a specialist, you cannot do other things, it's not true. Because those that truly understood, they can move in any other domain fantastically, or it takes them a little time to adjust. It is more about, do you want to pass? You are a super judoka. Do you want to be exposed as a dancer? Do you want to be exposed as a painter? They say, oh, you are such a great strong man and you do painting. How is that possible? Many times we don't do what we like to do because we are afraid what the others they will tell about us.
Yeah. It's there has been a few examples of kind of like this dancing show where they'll always have a professional footballer or a professional rugby player on, and they normally do okay actually when they kind of they kind of make the transition. But we're talking about form here as well and appearance, and I mean it's a slight change here, but your website is beautiful. And actually on your website you've got this guy Mike who's an art director, visual director.
Yeah.
And he's like actually listed as part of your team here, right? And you've got beautiful photography. It's a beautifully put together site. Your videos are lovely. I mean, you're not ignoring the aesthetic here.
No, I mean, I love art. How we can be a mover without being an artist? I'm so sorry, we are still building, I'm in this physical culture or whatever, but I don't know if you know Peter or Tom Randall from UK. Peter Randall is like one of the most important sculptors in the world, and he works with the stone. And of course, we're going to collaborate with him because we understand that to understand a human being, to understand physicality, we need to work with the materials.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of times, we've been sculpting our environment. But now it seems like we say, oh, I only need my own body to understand what is the movement about. No, I don't think so. You really need to work materials that are around. You need to work with the wood. You need to work with the clay. You need to work with the stone so you can understand the properties through which we are made.
Yeah, I used to work on farms when I was a kid. Your big kind of pieces of wood reminded me of working on a tree farm. And there was definitely an education of sort of digging in the ground and moving trees around and moving boxes of potatoes around. And actually, and also the creative side, whether that's painting or with clay, I know you guys sometimes work with. And that definitely adds something. And it's part of what it is to be human, right? Like if we see a monkey make something out of sticks, we're kind of impressed because it's something human-like about that. So I love that you're bringing this kind of art in, and also that the aesthetic side is there, because often I hear people complain about that. They're like, yeah, I'm a good this teacher or that teacher, but I can't do the marketing because other people have better aesthetics. And I'm like, well, take care of that. Why not? Why is that not part of what you're interested in?
Of course, I mean, you wear clothes. I mean, they a little bit represent, I don't know, whatever that with me that means. And I like to be surrounded with people that are creative. Even when you look at a beautiful car, I mean, there's many great minds working together: engineers, designers, great drivers, etc. So I want in my team having a really top people, and I am surrounded by a super great human beings that are extremely creative. And if I do something mediocre, they immediately will slap my face. So there is no way for me not to innovate.
And what are some of the kind of personality patterns or psychological patterns that you see? Like, I want to get back to something you said earlier here, that, you'll see someone, I don't know, getting, like, there's one exercise I was looking at, and I was looking at it, just looking at it, I was going, God, I'd get frustrated if that was me. I could see already, just feel my response to it, So I'm interested in some of these kind of like psychosocial patterns that come out in the training.
Well, we always work in a couple. This is this was kind of very basic. We said, if you want to understand better who you are, you need to work with another partner. And that was a big part of it. And now, of course, there is a full variety. You have to work and solve troubles alone. You have to work in a couples. You have to work in a small groups, and you have to work with the big groups. And within each setup, we setting up slightly different games, physical games, through which we can understand how we are communicating. The communication, we cannot not communicate. So we have to have a really good look on how we articulate our stories and how we retell the stories, and how we can inspire other people to move forward and live their life.
And I love this idea of working with another human being, because it's such a different level of complexity. And it reminds me of when, mixed martial arts started. All the arts that had solo forms did really badly compared to every art. Wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Thai boxing, they were all partner arts. You know what I mean? And they all had limitations, because you have to have rules, and every rule creates a limitation. But it was noticeable to me that no solo arts did well when mixed martial arts started. It was the ones that had actually learned through the complexity and the trial and error of a human being, right?
Yeah. There's who you are, what you do, or what Fighting Monkey would be, is thanks to other people. When I have the feeling that we build up all our research with our students. The students are the most active and most creative part of all the development, because they came with the most challenging questions. They came with an obstacles that I could not solve. The students helped me to be exposed. The students humiliated me. And through that humiliation, I become more humbled, and I try to move forward, whatever practice that would be. And so, yes, we are who we are through the other people.
And you say, humiliate, what does that look like? So someone turns up and maybe they're a wrestler and they kind of do some crazy shit you've never seen before, or they just express something more beautifully, or...
Exactly. They can formulate things better. They can many times move better if it's their domain. So, this is extremely important. What we are doing in Fighting Monkey, we post some kind of thought experiments. So I say, why humans do have to stretch while animals never stretch? Mm-hmm. And of course, first answer is the cat is stretching, or the dog is stretching. You say, yes, they stretch for a few seconds. So now you have to explain me why after our workout we have to stretch, and the animals after really hard workout they do not stretch at all. Mm-hmm. And so I pose it. I know that this is not a complete truth, and I already know where I'm leading them, but I set this thought experiment, and they come up with really incredible creative answers. And so I say, how it's possible that the time is speeding up? How it's possible you cannot take more time for your practice? Why everything has to be done in 3 weeks, 3 months? Why you don't think like, I can live 150 years, so where I would be rushing? Why I don't take time to learn a squat for 5-6 years? Because that's the real truth. If you really want to change, your squatting or your whatever skills have been boxing or whatever, it really takes time to rewire. It takes for your bones, ligaments, and tendons to change the structure. And it's not happening very fast. It's usually happening quite slow.
Yeah, the same thing with using the embodiment for personal growth work. We have a year-long course, and really I'd like to make it 2 years, but I couldn't sell that, And I said to students, that's the minimum, really. And, if I'm working with a corporate group, they don't want to hear that. They want the quick result. And I can give people tools quickly, but real kind of long-lasting change, yes, you can get rid of a phobia, for example, real quick, but changing as a person on that deep, as you say, rewiring level takes a bit of time and practice and community is what I've found.
Because we are so obsessed, and we're using this word of neuroplasticity. But does anyone talk really about the negative side of neuroplasticity, which means how you unlearn? How you unlearn is not very easy. Once something is well said, how are you going to rewire?
Yeah.
Kids are wiring immediately. They're creating this long-term potentiation in many different ways. They bring things together. It's very creative. Now, once you set up something and you do that for 10 years, how are you going to rewire? What are the methods of rewiring of your communicative habits, of your relational habits? And this is something that interests me really a lot, because that's a real art. There you have to be extremely creative, not because creativity is great, because creativity is the only solution.
Yeah. And once those things get wired in, I sometimes use the example of getting people to cross their arms, then get them to cross the other way, or do the fingers, and it just feels so wrong to do it the other way. And I have a game, I say to my students, I'll give you £100 if you don't cross your arms or legs today. And not one person can last a full day, because at some point that, we told mindfulness is the solution, right? But at some point you stop paying attention and they're thinking about something else and they cross their arms. And I'm like, oh, you're out. And most people don't last more than an hour or two. And these are trained meditators and people that have awareness practices. We're not talking muggles, but it's just tricky to train out some of those automatic patterns that have been wired together.
Yeah, so then only what we were looking at, even in this more unlearning or unlearning to learn something, what we realized that the only solutions we found is that the situation which we offer will lead them to kind of slowly understand how we can switch off the automatic pilot in which we are kind of operating. How we can go from knowing to more not knowing, so you are more, because through your prior knowledge you bring into existence only a certain part of reality. And so can we in certain ways to stimulate you in such a way that you will see things that you didn't see before, even if it's the same room, same music, or the same physical situation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's interesting how we're framing, isn't it? Like I was just telling you about earlier, my wife who plays poker, she also deals poker. And when she's dealing poker, no one looks at her. And then she plays poker and people aren't aware that she's been studying their game on the other casino for the last month. And they don't even recognize, and she's pretty memorable to look at, especially if you're a heterosexual man. But it's like people aren't even looking at her when she's a poker dealer. Yeah. So she's looking at them and she's getting all this information, and then they come and it's because it's like the reality is just focused on the cards at that point. They're not looking at the dealer. That people are in their game. So it's always amusing to me how much we imprison our perception by kind of like what we're focused on and what we know how to do already.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's all this going for you then? So it sounds to me like you're involved in this like grand experiment, which is a sort of, lifelong experiment. So on the one hand, it's an impossible question because you don't know where it's going, right? But like, what is your sense of where you might be at with this with 10 years or 30 years time?
Well, we are, I like to keep humble and I don't want to say big words, but it seems like that we are having really amazing results on the whatever psycho-mental level to physical level. Opening up joints that have been blocked and not having any options through traditional physiotherapy or through traditional psychotherapy. So I think something is appearing as being very beneficial, and what we are doing, we now creating really large video library, and we start to more structurally write about what we are doing using very simple language that could be accessible to anyone, to expert as much as to anyone who is walking on the street. So for me, now is my task is to create a little bit of a map, like a great cognitive map in which maybe my students, my first generation or second generation people could have a look on it and get inspired and take it into another place, another domain, another level. When I enter with Linda to a room, we always say to ourselves, okay, who from our students is the next Einstein? So how we can listen to our students so well that if they see something amazing, we can help them to become aware of how amazing they are.
Yeah.
And how incredible they could be in their art. So this is something that is very, very present in every single workshop.
Well, interesting. I'm not going to name their names, but of my 3 high potential top young students, 2 of them decided to go to your workshop. So they're obviously spotting something there. And it strikes me that maybe you can talk about this. You guys are popular right now. Like, I was excited to have this interview. I mean, there's a wider movement, right? Which is the free movement. Martial arts is freeing up. Yoga's freeing up in a different way. And, we had Rafe Kelly on the show, Patel, I hope to get on. There's the whole kind of free movement thing has become a movement, literally in the last kind of few years. Generally, it seems like it's trending, right? Like, obviously you're not the same as those guys, you do different stuff, but there are some similarities. There is a movement in the world that's become very popular towards play, freedom, and not just kind of limiting oneself. So it seems like you're part of a bigger trend to me.
We started this movement thing some good 15 years ago, and many great educators from a movement industry been educated by us, or at least passed through our training. And it's not like I try to get any recognition for it or whatever, but I don't want to be boxed in a movement. Movement is ridiculous. I mean, like, just let's have a look on how we could be practicing together and inspiring each other.
Yeah.
What about the movement and martial arts and architecture or whatever? Like, these are just the means through which we can express ourselves. That's the whole point. I understand movement is becoming big. Yes, it's only a trend. Movement is for the beginners. We need to understand how you, in your particular context, can excel in what you're doing. How you can better organize your whatever energy, time scheduling, whatever you want to do. It's not okay if you come to my workshops and you end up kind of mimicking or only emptily copying of what is happening there. That's why what we offer in a workshop is a very good practice method.
Yeah,
that is sharing essential formless principles that can be applied somewhere else or can be played and explored in their abstract way, abstract context.
Yeah, and as you say, like, movement's the kind of method, not the end result, right? Like, if I don't know, like, what do I want to do with movement? If I want to get to Scotland, I'm better off getting on the train, not learning to be a runner. And it's kind of, you'll get very flexible doing yoga, or a very tough guy doing karate or whatever it is. I'm always like, well, what's the point in that? Like, how does that actually help you?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I'd rather run for someone to help than run on the beach just for running. I don't know. That's if my jiu-jitsu class, or like I regularly train MMA, but for me this is a communication training. I am absolutely not interested in kind of becoming locked in that system. It's one of the possible communication trainings. And again, I still think like all the movement is just it's just another trend, because we should not be talking about the movement. We should be talking about, yes, what do you want to do and how are you going to organize yourself? How are you going to organize your intentions in order to get wherever you need to get? And please, let's not get there in a natural and effective way, because that's another fake. It's because, what is natural? Natural is to be born, develop, and then slowly die. But if you want your joints or your mind be young, you have to do something a little bit unnatural in order to last longer than expected. And when we talk about the effective, of course, we want to be effective in what we do, but to become effective many times, or most of the time in a training, you have to train ineffectively, or introduce an aspects that are invisible or maybe counterintuitive. So when I fold my hip joint, I don't only fold it into squatting. I understand I need to fold it and torsion it, like when the kids are squatting. And so I have to probably readjust the entire system of working on the strength of my legs.
Nice. What's the weirdest thing you do?
Weirdest thing?
Yeah, I just intuitive question.
Okay. I'm okay. You probably didn't see me freaking out with the kids. I am ridiculous.
You're ridiculous with the kids.
Like the people in the traffic really looking what's happening in our car. Like we are jumping. So I'm still. Someone described me as a 16 years old child in front of the Christmas tree, but not only Christmas, but all the year through.
I'm imagining you're a cat on the Christmas tree. That's how I'm picturing you. A cat attacking bulbils on a Christmas tree.
Something like that.
I love being around kids as well, because you kind of, like, in terms of spontaneity, and like my niece I was reminded watching one of your videos where your wife is kind of like jumping at you from different angles, and it reminded me of my niece. She would just do that shit. She'd just jump on me and she'd load my body just on the physical level in a way which I just would never get in a gym ever. And I don't want to drop her because I love her, right? And it's really hard to explain to my sister if she gets a black eye or some shit, so it's like I'm super motivated and she's hitting me at all these different angles, and I'm having fun, and there's an emotional level to it as well, right? Like I want her to feel safe and loved, and I'm like, wow, this is so much better as a workout than a fucking machine in it, like a bench press machine or some shit in the gym,
Well, you can also do an Olympic weightlifting, or you can also go and try to lift the guy who doesn't want to be lifted. And then shall I spend the time alone in the gym, or making my drills lonely, or I'm gonna meet another human being and I'm gonna wrestle that another human being? I'm probably gonna be much complex and much more powerful than carrying a dead weight.
Yeah. And also you're learning on the communication level, you're learning on the social level in a different way. Like it strikes me, and I talked about this with Rafe as well, it strikes me in a lot of the games you guys play, there's quite a complex kind of like emotional engagement and social engagement where, like, for example, because you can change the rules, you could just be a jerk. So like part of the training, as I see it, is that like people not learning not to be jerks, or you're training with a woman who's half your body weight. And it's like that brings stuff up. And it seems to me like a lot of your exercises, because they're a bit freer, develop the person in a different way than if there's just like, okay, you're playing football and here are the rules.
Well, we never, like there's one exercise that we work on quite often when we get wrestlers or jiu-jitsu guys or judo guys. We say, okay, clench the fingers together and break the fingers of other person, and let's see what happens. And within that, we are learning strategies, how to compose the whole structure and how to use less power, how to use the whole animal. But it's pretty brutal. And you can always tell if you feel pain, and so you stop the game immediately. And I used to say, it doesn't matter you have 30 kilos less. You have to experience what does it mean if someone who is 900 kilos is pouncing on you when you are 70.
Yeah.
You have to experience it, and then we can lower it down, and then we can introduce another rules where someone who is so strong and heavy will have much more troubles.
Yeah.
So I will create an obstacle games within which the big guy or strong girl will suddenly feel very weak. And that's what we are doing. We go from one mountain to another. So in one game, you feel like you are the king of the world. In another game, you feel like, oh my God, I really do not know anything. And this is what I'm gonna be doing with you until you stay with us in our practice in Fighting Monkey.
Yeah, and it seems like what you're doing is so diverse. There's no way anyone could be good at even half of it.
No.
Like just coming in, even if they're a good judoka or they're a good dancer, they're going to, I saw, one thing is like rolling around on the floor, and I was like, oh, I could probably be pretty good at that because of my Aikido. And then I saw another one and I thought, okay, I'd be shit at that. I'd be murdered, And it's like, that would be a pretty interesting emotional roller coaster, to be honest, much as just the physical learning.
Yeah, of course, because I always ask myself, if I cannot teach anything Ronaldo or Marcelo Garcia or Ilias Iliades in judo or I don't know, the best boxer in the world, if I have nothing to offer in a training, I should not be teaching anyone.
Yeah.
But I'm really sure that I am creative enough to take them apart, to create a game within which they will lose their amazing capacity. So this is our job. We sit with Linda and we speculate how to take apart the world that you think works so well together.
You see people from a lot of different backgrounds. Like one of my favorite games is like guess what practice someone comes from, but also to like look for the patterns. I mean, do you see personality patterns or emotional patterns in like different groups who come to you? Like, for example, I consistently find BJJ guys to be fairly humble, and I wonder if that's because they're always getting choked out, So it's like, do you see any patterns like that with different groups who come to you?
Exactly. It was a very good example. I really love jiu-jitsu guys. There's not much of speculation. If you have something to propose, please go on a mat, roll and see what happens. And because you've been choked a million times, you become humble. You are not talking trash to anyone. And that's very beautiful. It's not, I'm a better mover than someone else. I have created this. No, created nothing. We are really walking on the shoulders of the other giants from other generations.
Yeah.
So yes, they are like most of the time people that practice function have much more behavior flexibility than those that were training all their life.
And is there any other patterns you see across other arts?
If this is in other arts as well?
Or other kind of personality patterns you see, in terms of kind of stuff coming out, how people react to things, how people approach learning, for example. I mean, that patterning's conditioned as much as the physical patterning, right?
Of course, but there is such a great diversity. You might be doing well for the first half of the workshop, and the second half of the workshop you're just going to be lost. Because what we are doing with Linda, we are not coming to a workshop. Of course, we have anatomy of injury workshop, or we have an earthquake architecture workshop, but we are not coming with the static rules. We come in, we know what is the volume of practice that we need to cover, what we have to introduce. But when we see people reacting and responding, we are constantly changing the structure, intensity, or the rules of the practice.
Yeah,
whenever you're always going to meet something else.
Yeah, my friend Marcin, who's pretty capable, he's physically pretty capable in many ways, and a nice guy too. Like he said that you fucked with him pretty well. And he said that you've quickly figured out what he could already do, and then kind of gave him something to do that he couldn't do. And he was, you know, and he's a kung fu teacher. He's been training a lot of different disciplines a long time, but he loved it because he's a real learner, you know. He was like, oh, great. You know, these guys really quickly found my weak spot. But he explained it to me. I was something to do with his legs or something, I don't know. But what are you most interested in right now? Like, as you develop this, as you go forward with this, what's giving you a boner right now?
Ooh. I'm most interested in my family, really. I'm spending a nice time going for a nice coffee or a red wine. That's what interests me the most.
so can you say that again? Because the sound actually went out. Your family, did you say?
I said my family, and I'm going for a good red wine with someone. That's what interests me the most. But I was also like,
you know what? There's an honesty to that, right? Like, I think any kind of embodiment person who's more interested in their practice than their family is sick. Like, I'm just going to... Seriously, man, it's like you're more interested in jiu-jitsu than your kids? Fuck you. You know, like you're more interested in Aikido than your wife? Like, that's perverted. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that is the answer I most respect in many ways.
No, really, I mean, this is number one priority. That's where I find the inspiration and power to go further. You know, like all these practices is just in vain, you know. If I meet with someone and I inspired at someone, my role is completed. I don't even have to show anything. I can sit on the chair and tell you a few words and maybe give one suggestion, and you can go on for another 10 years of exploring. Yes, I've done my job. Yeah. It's not like I have to move every day and be the strongest man in the world in order to prove something to someone. It's really not true. This is just a cliche.
Yeah. And how does it feel to be like hot property right now? You know, you guys are kind of like, your workshops are filling out, and so you're kind of like, on the one hand, you know, you're all this humility which you bring to it about taking yourself out of the center. But on the other hand, you know, you guys are kind of, your star is rising. Let's put it that way.
Well, you know, it's not perceived that way from inside.
Yeah.
I think as the body of the knowledge is growing, I feel more troubled because I understand how little I know. It brings me to my ethical mind. This creates a lot of troubles. I work more intensively than when I was younger. Because of course I'm meeting more interesting people. I'm meeting professors from university. I'm meeting people from different fields. I'm meeting the best artists in the world, and you know, like these guys are amazing. And I always question, like, who am I? I mean, what am I have to share with the other people? And so, you know, rising or not rising star, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
So this is, you know, I'm so happy that the workshops are filling up. But I also tell you that we are preparing badly for every workshop. It's not like I'm coming and my mind is somewhere else. I give attention to every single person that is there because I love my students. They spend their money and I respect that a lot. And the money that we're going to get is going to be used again for research. It is not like going only to my pocket. I'm giving you new opportunities. These are very great money that I'm getting. So, and so, you know, rising or not rising star, I don't know what that means. For me, I'm still miserable as when I was 18 years old.
You know, I was getting a bit depressed the other day about thinking, oh, do I have anything really to offer? And then I was kind of hit with the thought, like, you know, I must have learned something in the last 10 years of doing this professionally and 20 years of playing with it. And I kind of thought, I wish I had the confidence of when I was kind of worse, you know, like there's a way in which it can actually be like, I don't know, you know, I don't know, how can I put this? Like, I mean, maybe that's something we have quite a lot of advanced practitioners who do listen to this, and it's, I hear people bullshit about this, you know, people that say, hey, I'm so humble, you know, I know what I don't know now and all this, but, you know, I'm really actually getting it sincerely from you. And it's what it was like for me earlier this week. There was just a day where I was like, what do I have to offer? And knowing all that you don't know and being around all these awesome people, and your students start getting better and better because people are attracted to you that are different. And that can be hard, actually, right? Like, you know, joking aside, that can really suck.
No, of course. But you know what happened to me? I was working with one of the geniuses in communication. I was doing my PhD, my doctorate study for 8 years with someone who was considered being a really incredible psychologist, really incredible communication training. You know what she'd done? I was 19 years old. She kind of saw in me maybe her next generation, someone who would take her position in university. And she said, oh, Jozef, I would like you to teach. So I was assisting to her since I was 20 years old in a university. I knew shit, but she only knew, and she knew very well that if she gives me opportunity to be exposed, I will learn the most. This is what in the beginning. This is not when you're ready. I had someone very powerful who gave me a space to fail. And I need to offer that also to my students.
Yeah. And this communication side of what you do, I'll just ask about this, then two more things to close. This is a bit different, isn't it? Because you're not just coming from a sports background or dance background or even theatre background, but you've studied at PhD level kind of human communication, right?
Yeah, like to put it in a simple words, when I was talking about the zero forms, so I can also tell you what is your primal language, or what is the tone in which you sound the best, right? Where is your kind of zero? So I spend a quite amount of time understanding how we are beautiful individual, and there is really only one tone in which you sound well. And as you're aging, and the cavities, they change, the quality of your vocals, they change, the quality of your breathing, there will be still only that one particular beautiful tone through which you can communicate and resonate with the others. And that beautiful tone of communication is when you say positive yes. And you say, yes, I agree with you. That's where you sound the best. That's where the music can travel, where your tone is traveling, when your speech can be kind of transposed through the space. And this is basically what communication is about. It's about how you can listen to the others, and how you can sound like yourself. Can you sound like yourself, especially in the moments of difficulties?
Nice. I think it's a positive place to start wrapping it up. In terms of finding out more about your work, it's fightingmonkey.net, right?
Yes.
Anywhere else online people can see your stuff?
No, I think it's just a channel of Fighting Monkey, Rootless Root, or fightingmonkey.net. That's where the most of the information is hidden.
Great. Workshops all over the world. I hope to make one of them one day if I can make my calendar match up. I'd certainly be curious to play with you. You're always welcome in Brighton if you're ever here. And any final message about the body, sir, for the listeners?
Just I wish for everyone to have their best life with their best friends. That's all what I wish for.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.